Well, we're going to go ahead and start today's program. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Art. We are broadcasting live today from the Bacchus Special Exhibition Gallery. My name is Camille Tewell. I'm an educator here, and I'm excited to be with you this morning to explore marble as material. And we can only do that through having these wonderful special guests with us. So I want to go ahead and introduce them. So we have Corey Riley, our objects conservator.
Hello.
Corey, thanks for being here.
Yes, indeed.
And connecting with us remotely today, artist Peter Oakley. He's in Asheville, North Carolina. And so Peter, can you say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
So the way it's going to work, we have our session today structured as a casual panel discussion. So I have prompts here in my notes that we developed to get the conversation started. And we also have questions submitted to us by students at Green Hope High School. So thank you, students from Green Hope, for sending those questions to us. And I'm just going to ask questions, and we'll just keep the conversation moving and see where it goes. What we would love to have happen is to also gather questions throughout our session today. And the way you can do that is through using the chat box in Zoom. Our program today is generously funded by the Bank of America and the Institute of Museum and Library Services, with additional support provided by Steve and Frosine Zeiss, Don Davis, and Peggy Wilkes. Support for collection research and initial study of the Statue of Bacchus here in our exhibition space was made possible by Anne and Jim Goodnight, the Andrew Mellon Foundation Fund for Curatorial and Conservation Research and Travel. So, so I want to thank all of those individuals that make our program possible today. It's very important to us that we are able to deliver to our funders statistics about who attends our programs. So what would be very helpful for us is if we could also practice using the Zoom chat box and if you could send us the information, the name of your school, and how many students are seated in the classroom with you today, so that we have those statistics. So if you've not used the chat function in Zoom before, you just want to mouse over the bottom of that window, and kind of toward the center, but a little bit toward the right, you'll see a bubble icon. If you click on that, that should bring up chat. And again, if you can just type in the name of your school and how many students are with you in the classroom, we'll write that down and record it. So thank you in advance for doing that. And then you'll be ready also to submit those questions from students. About those questions, submit them at any point in time. You won't interrupt the flow of the program. I have somebody, one of my colleagues stationed right next to the computer, that can write down those questions and hand them to us so that we can ask them during the program. Okay. So I have questions that are specific for Corey and specific for Peter. They're grouped into different kind of subjects or categories, but the first question is really for both of them, and it's really just asking them to introduce themselves, to explain kind of what they do and why they're here today talking about marble, how marble relates to what they do. So Corey, would you like to start?
Absolutely. My name is Corey Riley. I'm an objects conservator here at the North Carolina Museum of Art. That means I restore and prepare everything that's three-dimensional. An object is anything that's not flat. And what falls into that is our Bacchus sculpture, where we are sitting now in the Bacchus exhibition. You'll see some images in later. Before he could be exhibited, we had to do a whole bunch of cleaning, research, testing, and preparation for this exhibition. So that is my role here in this room right now.
Okay. And Peter?
I'm a marble sculptor. I make all kinds of sculptures in white marble and black marble. I also work with jade and like black jade and green jade and colored stone like calcite, but primarily in marble. And it's kind of the only thing I'm good at, so that's why I work in marble. But also it's a versatile material because you can call in all these references from antiquity, like the Bacchus. But it's I work with marble because I'm good at it, I guess.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to start moving in another direction, well, or continuing, and with a question for Corey. And now our topic, we're going to connect our thoughts more to antiquity, which you've just mentioned. So Corey, what do you wish people knew about marble in antiquity or in classical art? What do people get wrong about it?
Sure. One of the main misconceptions is when you go to a museum today and you see the classical gallery, you see all these beautiful white sculptures lining the hallways, but they weren't always white. So they would have been painted in antiquity. So they would have had pigments, their skin, their hair, their clothing could have been colored. But after years and years of being buried in an archaeological situation, a lot of these pigments don't last anymore. And it's only in the recent couple decades that we've been able to really identify the colors through scientific analysis of very fragment, tiny spots, usually in the crevices of these sculptures, but they weren't totally painted. And so it's a different idea when you think of them looking more lifelike with color than as just a white sculpture. Some of the other things about antiquity, we cannot date marble, so that's an interesting fact. If you were to date marble, you'd be dating the time that it was formed in the earth, right? So if you think about that, marble is far, far older than when it was excavated and created into a sculpture. So you have to use tool marks or art historical references, that sort of thing, in order to identify the date of these sculptures as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Great. Peter, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how your work connects with classical art and culture.
Well, as we were talking about before we went live, a lot of times I'll compose an object, and I pick the subject matter to relate specifically to some ancient statue or some group of ancient statues. The stack of cassettes, if you want to throw a picture of that up on the screen, I did a sculpture that referenced a stack of cassette tapes in 2013, and there's the takeout boxes. The cassette stack, the way the cassettes stack up, it gives an angle change low down and then another angle change up high, and it's a perfect mirror of the contrapposto composition that you see in all the ancient statuary. Like the Bacchus, it's contrapposto. The hips are turned this way and the shoulders are turned back this way. But with these compositional similarities, then I can call in a reference to a statue like Bacchus, and that lends some meaning and some kind of conceptual strength to this really small sculpture. It gives it some power, and it broadens the conversation to be able to talk about, the gods and goddesses. Because typically, something like this, just a little sculpture, it's kind of on its own. But if I can relate it to some important things that happened in antiquity, or say like something that happened in the Renaissance, then there's a lot more to talk about. There's a lot more possible meaning in the object.
Peter, could you explain the dimensions of this piece just so we have a sense of how tall it is?
Yeah, it's very near life size. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio with real cassette tapes. So I think they're like a cassette tape's maybe 4 inches long, and the whole stack of these things is maybe 5.5 or 6 inches tall.
Gotcha.
It's a small object. But this is all carved out of one piece of black marble, and there's no treatment on the surfaces. It's just a matter of sanding it or polishing it. If you want it to be deep black, you can just polish it black.
Awesome.
So Peter, I have a question about the stone as well. Do you choose stone as a medium and marble as a medium because it has been around for so long? Is that part of your process?
Yeah, I like that. I like how durable it is going forward, but I do like how it's unimaginably ancient. Yeah. What you touched on about how old the stone is it's something I think about a lot. When I was first starting out, the only marble that I had access to was old gravestones, because I could get damaged marble gravestones really cheaply, and I didn't have any money starting out. So anyway, I had been asked a few times, like, doesn't that creep you out that this thing was in a graveyard or it was a gravestone? But You know, it was a piece of marble in the earth for 100 million years. I don't even know how old it is, but if it was marble in the ground for millions of years, it was a gravestone for an eye blink. Just invested it with very little. If it's haunted, it's barely haunted at all.
Right.
Well, that's fascinating to me, because a lot of times stone sculptures are created out of old columns or old architectural pieces. There's this reuse that continues over and over and over that we see also in a lot of the other sculptures here we have at the museum.
Yeah, each subsequent project has to be just a little bit smaller than the thing that it was before.
Exactly.
Funny.
Great. Awesome. Okay, so let's just continue on thinking about marble as we're doing. So Corey, in your work as an objects conservator, you work with different kinds of materials. So in terms of analyzing or cleaning marble in your work, what makes marble unique?
Well, marble is very hard, so everyone assumes that it is undamageable, right? But it's actually very, very porous. And one of the issues, actually I have with Peter's piece, is that people always want to touch it, right? Because they want to know, is it marble? Is it styrofoam? So as an artist, you are playing with that disguise of material as something else. And so our visitors are so intrigued. They always want to reach out. They want to touch it. They want to find out for themselves what it is. And so on one hand, we love the engagement. We love that they're intrigued and really thinking about it and wanting to investigate themselves. But then you also have the problem that your fingers and your finger oils can be sucked into the stone. And so repeated touching over and over and over can cause a orange haze or a staining in the stone. And so we want to prevent that. So we have this dichotomy of engagement of the public, but we also want to protect the artwork. So although stone and marble looks like it will last forever, it's very susceptible to things being sucked into it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Peter, how do you feel about people touching your artwork?
on a figurative sculpture, that discoloration of the marble can be a good thing. It gives it like more of like a lifelike, like a skin tone almost, instead of just being this stark white. On my work, if it's a stack of styrofoam takeout boxes and then it looks kind of brownish, that's not a great look, you know?
Well, don't you worry, I always clean it off, so I'll take care of your pieces.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Also, when you talk about figurative pieces, as a conservator, we've had many conversations that it's always noses and toes that people want to touch, right?
Yeah.
So the noses and the toes will have more staining than anything else. Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
It's human nature.
Wow. And there's Peter's work in our collection stack. It is currently on view in the West Building. So if you live in the area and you haven't seen it in person, you really should. It's awesome. And what you can't see in the picture, I'm sure Peter could talk more about it, is the way it sparkles in the light of the galleries. The marble is really amazing to see in person.
Well, I have a question for Peter about that. Do you choose your marble because of anything, inclusions, grain size, that sort of thing?
For sure. This marble came from Colorado. The quarries are in a town called Marble in Colorado up in the mountains. It's called Yule marble. Some of the stone there is kind of golden, and some of it is like got a greenish hue to it. I definitely found a block that was white, but you can get what's called unfigured marble that's just perfect white. And I am not a huge fan of that. I like if the marble has a little bit of an inclusion here or there, and that particular block had a really slight, like a diagonal vein of some kind of other black material in it. And I'm not a geologist. I don't know what that stuff is. It's a little bit harder. That black vein through the stone is a little bit harder. So it's really tricky to get a flat plane cut all the way across it, because all the tools that I use, they want to ride up over the darker, harder colored stone.
Sure.
But
do you know what it is, the black vein?
I don't know what it is, not testing, but I wanted to talk about Bacchus for a second, because if you look at his leg, are we able to zoom in on his right leg? We're going to have you guys do that. What you're going to be able to see there is an orange veining, right? So this is really fascinating. If you look at his right leg, not his left leg, there's this orange tone that goes through it. So this is a pentelic marble, and pentelic marble has veins of mica running through it. Mica has iron, and so this is actually iron staining because of those veins that have been in that stone. And so, you know, one thing is Peter has these brown or dark colored veins running through it. We don't know what's going to happen in 2,000 years. So here we have the iron that's actually oxidized inside the stone and is one of the major characteristics of this leg that I was able to identify. So what each stone that you choose has different characteristics, for sure.
Yeah, you know, it's possible when that stone was first quarried, that might have just been like a slightly dark colored vein in there. But once it got quarried and cut out and exposed to the atmosphere, it gets a bunch of oxygen, and then the iron oxidizes and turns orange.
Exactly. I don't think it was intentional, because I don't think they would have chosen an orange type of stone. I think that was an aging over time.
Yeah.
And so you have to.
I worry about that. I have to leave that up to the conservators of the future. You know? But I think those darker inclusions do have a little bit of iron in them from the stone in Colorado.
Yeah.
So it'll probably look like that in a couple of thousand years.
Yeah.
Hopefully the museum's endowment continues that long.
Absolutely.
Well, the Green Hope students did want to know, was there a specific type of marble that you seek in your work, Peter? And I think that you have addressed that to a certain extent. But if there's anything more you want to share about how you select marble, feel free.
There's one other thing I'd like to say about it. So there is, obviously in my work, there's kind of a trompe l'oeil effect that I'm going for, but I'm not fully trying to trick people into thinking it, like for example, that piece, into trying to trick people that it's styrofoam. I want that visual effect to happen, that they think they're looking at styrofoam, the viewer, but within a few seconds, I want people to understand that it's stone. So that's why I like for there to be some faint veining in the stone, so that it quickly telegraphs that to the viewer that this is marble. It's not, I don't want people to wonder if is this 3D printed? Is it cast plastic? Is it glass? You know, I want that association to happen pretty quickly, that they're looking at first they're thinking it was styrofoam takeout box, and then instantly they're thinking marble, like why in the world would someone do this? And then a little conversation develops.
Absolutely. Do you ever go to the quarries where the marble comes from, or is there a disconnect between artists and the quarries these days?
With me, I go to the quarry. I like to go to the quarry.
Yeah.
Not everybody's really set up for that. I'm kind of an outdoors type person. I worked as a stonemason for a long time. I'm comfortable around loud noises and machinery, and I'm pretty good at not falling off of a cliff and things like that. Not everybody's allowed into a quarry, but you kind of have to prove that it's okay for you to be there. But yeah, I like to go to the quarry and see the material, and I like to make friends with the quarry people.
I feel like this also is a way that you're connecting to ancient stone, because in the times where these things were carved, there would have been much more connection between this quarry and the artist going there. I think artists today sometimes don't always take into account where their materials come from, and I feel like you really have a strong understanding of where it comes from and why you're choosing that, which is really wonderful.
Great.
There's something else I'd like to say about that too, that there are a lot of artists that they're sitting in a studio somewhere and they dream up an idea like, oh, wouldn't this be cool carved out of marble? They've never worked in marble, but if you have money, you just call up a sculpture studio in Italy and you order the sculpture, and they send somebody to the quarry, they get a block of marble, they have a 3D scan of the thing that this artist wants made. A robot does all the rough out work, like a 6-axis robot just does all the rough out work, and then they have sculptors there that just finish the work, and then they ship it to that person's studio. They sign their name to it, and it goes on display.
You know what's really fascinating about this? Another project I've been involved with lately is a William Story sculpture carved in 1865. So he was an artist working in Italy. He made a plaster of what he wanted, and then the artist carved it. So this tradition has been going on for hundreds of years.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I didn't even realize that they were using 3D casts in order to do this sort of thing still. So it's really fascinating to hear that it continues.
Yeah, the difference is a lot of that work is done by computers and robots, and then total strangers. I think that William Wetmore's story, I think he was a carver himself.
Absolutely.
And he would have, the tradition in Italy back then was you would have sculptural specialties. So there would be some people, if there was an architectural element or furniture, there would be some people in the studio that was their job. And then some people are great at doing hairdos. You know, anyway, there are all these little
hands, right?
Or
hands.
hands.
The face were all separate too.
Yeah.
Peter, a student at Broughton High School, has asked a question related to stacks. And since we were just looking at that work, I want to share their question. They want to know, how long did it take you to carve it?
It's kind of hard for me to say definitely. I think it was in the neighborhood of 10 months, something like that. I try to keep multiple projects going on concurrently, just so I have distraction if I need distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on it off and on for over a year, but I think it took about 10 months steady going.
Peter, were you working from a model that you were copying when you were carving this?
Yeah, I did. I don't know how many of you have ever worked in the back of the house in a restaurant, but you know, this is how these styrofoam takeout boxes are just kind of stacked up in a restaurant.
Yeah.
When the stock gets kind of low, everybody's in a hurry. Somebody grabs a handful out of a box and they throw them back on the stack just so that they have them available to go out the door for takeout orders. But I happened to notice in the back of a restaurant that somebody threw the top, when they restocked this stack, they threw the top handful of boxes on there the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And when I configured my model, I stacked it up that way. So it's just, a bunch of boxes oriented one way and then like a little handful stuck on there the wrong way. But it makes a really cool kind of architectural form. And it almost looks like a couple of Muppets to me, like a couple of faces. I don't know if everybody else sees faces the way I do, but it looks like two little Muppets.
That's awesome. And that follows up too on a question that we got from Green Hope in advance of today's session about, they wanted to know what made you think to carve takeout boxes from marble? What was your inspiration? But it sounds like it was based on an experience you had seeing the boxes, right?
Yeah, that particular piece, I did a bunch of styrofoam stuff. That was, I think, the 10th thing in the series. But the first styrofoam takeout box that I did, it was just a closed one, and just a single one on its own. I mentioned that the marble I could get my hands on was typically like old gravestones.
Yeah.
And the dimensions were what they were. I didn't have access to big blocks of marble. So I just kind of racked my brain. I didn't want to do miniatures. I was just trying to think of any life-size sculpture I could do with the resources that I had. And it occurred to me to do styrofoam takeout box as I could. And then that series was kind of popular, and I went out to Colorado and bought a larger block for that piece, for the stack.
Gotcha. Great. So I want to, since we are here in the Bacchus Exhibition Gallery and you showed the leg a moment earlier, I want to follow up on that and ask you, Corey, how did marble science help you solve mysteries around Bacchus? Because this exhibition, which just opened, is all about how a team of professionals here solved mysteries around this sculpture. So I wonder if you could tell that story.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you look at Bacchus over here, what's wonderful is he's actually like a Mr. Potato Head. He has different pieces of marble put together. His torso is one piece, his head is an additional piece, his arm, his legs. He's made out of 7 different pieces of marble. And the reason why this is if you're in ancient Rome, the footprint of Rome is much larger than Rome is today. So a lot of the farmers would be able to go out in their field and they would be excavating and digging out their fields. They would find an arm, a leg, a head. These are all things that were buried. And this is so back in the Renaissance and neoclassical time, about 300-400 years ago, you'd find pieces of marble and you put them together to get one complete sculpture. So we knew that Bacchus was made from different marbles, but we didn't know what the marbles were. And the way that science can help us with that now is the way that you test where a marble comes from is called isotopic analysis. Now, as I said, you cannot date marble, but what you can do is figure out which quarry on Earth it came from. And so if you have a quarry that was only open and operating in ancient times, you know that that's an ancient stone. So what we were able to find is the torso of Bacchus came from Turkey. One leg is Paros, an island in the Greek Aegean. The other leg, which I talked about with the orange staining, as well as his arm, are Pentelic marble, which is an island just north of Athens. The head is from Thasos, a different island. And then we have the sub and the base are Hymetic marble, which is a mountain that's south of Athens. So here we have 5 different quarries, all ancient stones, put together to make the sculpture of Bacchus. And so you have both of the history of the pieces in ancient time, but you also have the time where it was put together and it became a piece of, it was Bacchus as its own. And we would not be able to identify that without the science.
And that's a complex story to tell. So you did a great job really boiling it down to its parts. And I would encourage any of the local students to come and stop by. There's so much more to sort of the details of that story to take in within this exhibition if you're curious to learn more about all of that.
And someday we'll be able to test Peter's pieces and tell you they came from Colorado.
Right.
I have a question about the Bacchus. Did I read that the arm that's raised was recently commissioned by the museum?
Absolutely. Now we're going to talk about something that's not marble. And the reason we didn't want to make it in marble is because his right leg is really shattered. And so it's put together from 15 different pieces. We didn't want to add any weight to the top. But we spoke with a local artist who does both marble carving but imitation marble as well. And this arm has been created by using a basketball player and taking a 3D scan of his arm. Because as I was saying earlier, Bacchus stands at 6'8". So in order to get the long arm length, we had to go to the basketball team. We took a 3D scan of that, printed it, molded it, and then created this arm out of a polyurethane that is much more lightweight than a stone arm would be.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so there's the arm that you're seeing right there. We have faux finished it. If you're in person, you can see it doesn't look quite right. We don't want to disguise it or confuse anyone thinking that it is part of the original sculpture, but we thought that as Bacchus, he really needed his grapes. And through our historical research, we were able to find an etching from 1836 where Bacchus still had his arm. So we were basing it off of historical research.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. Just checking in on time there. Awesome. So I want to move to any other questions that have come in that I need to address in that chat. I do see a little icon there, so I wasn't sure. No, okay. Great. So I think in the time remaining, we'll take one more question and we'll use one of the questions that we received from Green Hope High School. So Peter, this question is for you. And this student wants to know if you could redo an older piece, what would it be and why?
Well, if we're talking about like something from antiquity, I tend to do that when I'm auditioning an idea. It takes me so long to work that I have plenty of time to think about like what's the next thing that I want to do. And typically when I'm thinking about my next idea, I'm thinking like, how does this relate to something important that has happened in the past? And how does my idea advance the ideas from that sculpture, you know? So I'm thinking about a sculpture right now that references Bernini's Statue of David. David and Goliath, you know, from the Bible, David kills the giant against all odds because he was kind of small. But so I'm thinking about doing a sculpture. It's a large technological object. I'll only say that much about it, but almost every sculpture I do is a remake of the thing in the past. But like the cassette stack and Bacchus, it's not immediately apparent.
Mm-hmm. Great. We actually just got another question, so even if we run over a moment or two, I'd love to have it answered. This is from a student at Green Level for you, Corey, and they want to know, how does a person become a conservator? What's the training for that?
Wonderful question. All right, so to become a conservator in the United States, you need to go to graduate school. So it is not something you can learn in college, but you have to prepare in college. And the different courses that you need to take, you have to take art history. So you have to know that you understand Bacchus and where he came from. You have to take studio arts to say that you have enough hand skills to use your hands in the conservation. But you also have to take chemistry. So you have to understand what the materials, analysis, this sort of thing, how it will affect the original piece, because one of our main tenets is to do no damage to the original artwork. So you have to make sure you're using the right adhesives, the right solvents to clean it. Sometimes I use lasers. So this is all very chemistry focused as well. So those are the three areas really that you need to work on.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Peter, for zooming in with us today. And thank you to all the students who joined us for today's program. If you want to continue learning with us virtually, I want to mention we do have virtual field trips. They're free for any teacher or classroom in North Carolina. So I will send you the link for virtual field trips in a follow-up email. I'll also send you a link to a SurveyMonkey so that you can evaluate today's program. But thank you again for being here, and have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.